I preach to you in the name of one God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Good morning.
Good morning.
For those of you who have not had the opportunity to meet, my name is Nick, and this is my very first day of being your new assistant rector. Father Tim gave me the opportunity to preach here in December in order to give us a chance to meet each other. And that was the last day I was in church before I was ordained deacon. And now I am here with you again on the Sunday before I will be ordained a priest. Ordination to the priesthood will be a huge transition for me. And right now it seems like I'm going through a whole gauntlet of major events in my life. I just graduated from seminary. I moved to a new city. I'm starting my vocation in parish ministry. I moved into my first apartment, and to top everything off, I'm getting married in October. I'm so grateful for all these wonderful events in my life. But at the same time, I am completely dumbfounded and a little bit terrified at the immensity of them all. We all pass major milestones in our lives that we use to define that portion of our journey. For some, starting a career can feel like the biggest leap they have ever had to take. For others, starting a family can be the moment that you will use to define your life. And for those who have just graduated from high school and are about to start college, what they will major in, what friends they will choose to make, will be an exercise in self-discovery and differentiating themselves from who they once were. Today, we are blessed to hear the story of creation, and one person was doomed to read it. And it might seem so familiar to us because we read it so many times in children's books and stories that we've been told by our parents and our Sunday school teachers when we were little. And we may overlook its beauty and wisdom. Genesis claims that in the beginning there was only a formless void. And God's act of creation was not just zapping something into existence. Instead, God's act of creation was an act of separating and differentiating in order to create meaning out of the meaningless, in order to create purpose out of the purposelessness. So that's why God created light from darkness and dry land he made from the sea. And it was only through this process of separating and making different did earth become a place that was suitable to humankind. God the Father is the creator. But the process of creation in Genesis and in our lives is not about materializing something out of nothing. Instead, God's power of creation lies in the ability to form our world and our lives from something void of meaning into something that is unique and special and a meaningful part of creation. I remember when I was in high school, I went through a major faith crisis. The religious atmosphere in my school felt overbearing, and it was filled with hypocrisy. Realizing the massive imperfection in this institution that I relied on was so painful that I lashed back at my peers who would try to evangelize to me or pressure me into believing as they believed. By day, I called myself an atheist, but at night, I still prayed so hard. I did not quite know what to say or how to pray, but I slowly developed this little routine at night where I went through all of my regrets and thanksgivings from that day, and I tried to give them to God. I did not realize this at the time, but my decision to pray every night and make a ritual despite of my bitterness was forming, and this was also an act of creation. God the Father formed the heavens and the earth out of a formless void, and here God was forming me to be a person of faith. Even when we only feel the chaos and bitterness of this world, God is able to meet us in this chaos and help us make meaning out of our lives. So while still keeping my prayers a secret, my family decided to go to a different kind of church. We were raised Catholic, and it turns out my parents were also going through a faith crisis and wanted to try out the Episcopal Church in town. This did not sit well with me. I did not like going to church, but if I had to go, I wanted it to be a Catholic church. I remember the service was pretty much the same, but the church was always going out and doing stuff. And at this point, I was pretty sure that I believed in God, and I was also pretty sure that church was boring at its best and offensive at its worst. That was until I became involved in the youth group at this new church. Instead of being taught all of this abstract stuff, they actually went out and made dinner with people living in the halfway houses, and they painted the Red Cross building in the neighboring town. And at the end of the year, the seniors got to go to Jamaica with a group from Sewanee, a small college in Tennessee. Our leader from Sewanee has a long history with the people there and worked to get communities out of poverty by helping them set up businesses. I always knew this work was important, but our priests and our chaperones were insistent that we were doing more than just having good intentions. They insisted that we were following in the footsteps of Jesus, and we were living into the spirit of the Eucharist. It was in Jamaica that I slowly started to see it, where what we were doing at the Eucharist seemed so important to what we were doing out there in the real world. And I became hooked. Our desire to be with people in need and to meet them in their struggles was not just a bunch of good intentions. It was sacred, and it was taught to us by someone who bridged the gap between our world and the divine. Jesus, the second person of the Trinity, is the divine in human form. And by living and dying in our world, Jesus is the ultimate act of empathy from the divine. We also hear a lot about the Holy Spirit, but few people know the Holy Spirit better than the people at the Church of the Holy Comforter in Atlanta, just a couple of hours away from here. I did an 8-week internship there in the summer before my senior year of college. I suspected that I might be called to be a priest, so I applied for this internship that gave me the opportunity to work in this church that catered specifically to the mentally ill. 3 times a week, bands would go out and pick people up from dozens of group homes and brought them into the church. Our parishioners varied greatly on how well they could function. Some worked well in the church and loved the arts and gardening programs, while others seemed only able to dwell in their own worlds. After 3 years of college, as a religion major, I felt pretty smart, but all of my ideas and all of my passion paled in comparison to the experience of this place. The Holy Comforter was a great intersection of the brokenness of the world with the grace that can be found in a community and in a church. No one found the need to try to answer all of the hard questions about why our parishioners were stricken with disease while others were not. Instead, the whole community moved along and worked hard to live and worship together, and there was only joy in this. In the midst of that community and of all of its imperfections was the love and formation of the Holy Spirit. So when I look back at the beginning of my journey to you as your curate, I cannot help but think that I was like the stuff in the beginning of creation, formless and void of purpose. But in the past 10 or 11 years of my life, I have ever been slowly formed by the Father's creation, the Son's divine empathy, and the Holy Spirit's power to bring us together. And I am so very grateful that you have allowed me to come here to be your assistant rector and allow me to continue to be formed by your community and by your love. I am really looking